Okay, we'll be shedding some clothing. It's okay, I wore short sleeves. So.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Atikokan Chamber of Commerce All Candidates meeting. With us this evening are three of the candidates for the Atikokan, or Thunder Bay Atikokan Riding, as some prefer to call it. We have Fred Gilbert from the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario, Mary Kazoris from the New Democratic Party, and Bill Morrow from the Liberal Party. There is a fourth candidate in the riding. We've just learned that this afternoon. Jonathan Milnes will run on behalf of the Green Party. Unfortunately, we had invited Russ Airgard, who at one point was the candidate of record, but he had to pull out late last week. The Green Party just made the deadline for getting a candidate in the riding, and you'll have to read the progress for a little more information about Jonathan Milnes. The debate tonight, well, it's not a debate. I shouldn't say that right off the bat. It's an all-candidates meeting. We've asked the candidates to have 5 minutes of opening statement, roughly prepared. There will follow from there 3 questions prepared by the Atikokan Chamber of Commerce. All the candidates have received those questions. We'll give them 3 minutes to answer that. Then it's your turn to ask questions of the candidates. We'd ask you to keep your questions in the form of questions as opposed to political statements, and to be as direct as possible, and each candidate will get a chance to answer them. Without further ado, beforehand we drew lots for speaking order, and Bill Morrow, you're up first.
Is my mic, our mics are working, but
yes.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here in Atikokan. I apologize for running into the room slightly under the wire. We got stuck in a bit of construction traffic on the way up here, but happy that we were able to make it on time. My thanks, Mike, to you and to the Chamber of Commerce for hosting us here this evening, and to the Chamber of Commerce for doing a bit of work, I know for certain, to bring this opportunity together, not only for the candidates, but for the people of Atikokan to have an opportunity to hear what it is that we have to say tonight. I would say when I saw the format that was sent to us, I was surprised. I'm not sure in all the years of doing this that I've ever seen the opportunity to provide a 5-minute opening statement. That's incredibly long and generous on your part, Mike, and the Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank you for that. And so I thought, what is it I'm going to say to the people of Atikokan when I come up here for this debate? And it's interesting what starts to run through your mind after 8 years of representing a community. And I thought, well, you know what, I'm not even going to write a speech. I've made some bullet points that I'll reference occasionally. But it occurred to me that, and that's the point of my campaign, we've got a record as Liberals, not only in Thunder Bay and Atikokan in Northern Ontario, but all across the province. And we have a record that I'm very proud of. And I look forward to, over the course of this campaign and all of the other debates, and we had our first debate last night. It was last night, Mary? We had our first debate already last night that Mary and I were at, and we had an opportunity to begin talking about that. And I'm looking forward over the course of the remaining 3 weeks to be able to talk to people not only in the debate format but at the doors about what it is that we have done on behalf of people. And not only just in Thunder Bay Atikokan, but in the broader context, what we have done as Liberals across Ontario that are benefiting people here in Atikokan as well, not just directly about Atikokan issues. And I thought, so I'm not going to write a speech. What more can I say? I've been here for 8 years. And I think that people in this community have a sense of what I have attempted to do and what I have accomplished on their behalf. And quite honestly, I'm very proud of it. Our government is very proud of it. In fact, I don't mind telling you that I have received criticism on a number of occasions from people in Thunder Bay, people who are my supporters, people who work for me, who from time to time will say to me, Billy, you're spending a lot of time up there. Why are you doing that? There's 3,000 people there. There's maybe 1,500 voters there. Why are you spending so much time? Why are you spending so much political capital on issues related to Atikokan? I don't always have the best answer for them. Perhaps it started for me some 30-some years ago when I lived here for a year. I've told this story occasionally before, but perhaps everybody doesn't know it, but I did live in Atikokan for a year. During my construction days, when I was still going through university, I lived here for a year when this coal plant was being constructed. And it's funny how things come full circle, how that plant where I worked at over 30 years ago has become a central part of the work that I've been doing on your behalf over the course of the last 8 years, and remains to this day a central part of what it is that we hope to see here and see happen in Atikokan. You know, Ontario, Canada, the world has just gone through the greatest recession since the Great Depression. We've been through some incredibly tough times together. In my opinion, we've come through them pretty well. There are a lot of people who are still suffering. We know that. But by and large, we feel as a government across Ontario that many of the policies and programs that we have brought into place that have come to bear not only here in Atikokan but all across this province have by and large placed our communities in a far better way than they would have been had it not been for those programs and policies that we brought into place. I'll say also that when you're in government, you're used to being criticized, and I'm prepared for that this evening. That's part of the deal, but one of the criticisms that we always hear is that the North is being ignored, and I sit before you today to say that, you know, I'll take criticism. I'm in government. That comes with the territory. But for people to suggest to you that Northern Ontario has been ignored with respect is preposterous. It's absolutely preposterous. I would say very directly that, quite frankly, it's possible that there's never been a time in the history of this province where Northern issues have received a higher profile, higher attention, and more direct support. And I'm very proud of that. Whether it's seniors and healthcare issues, whether it's people who are very directly in a difficult way affected by the economic cataclysm that we've all been through, we've brought programs together to bear and help them. And a lot of the work that we've done may not benefit you directly here in Atikokan, but there may be people from Atikokan who are working, for example, at a Bombardier plant in Thunder Bay, where with direct investment from our government, over 800 new people have been hired over the last two to 3 years. I've met some of them who are from Atikokan who are working there. So I raise that just as an example of some of the things that we've done as a government that are helping you, perhaps not directly here, but are helping you nevertheless. You know, at the end of the day, we all end up where we end up. I have had a couple of fantastic experiences here in Atikokan, where I've knocked on doors and I've had people say to me, Billy, don't worry about it. People know what you've done. They know how hard you've tried, and they know how hard you've worked. They can't deny it. That was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. One of the nicest experiences I've ever had at a door. Doesn't matter to me if he's saying it to 4 people or 40 people, he said it to me. And after 8 years of representing your city, when I hear those types of things from people at a door, someone who I had never met before, who didn't have a Liberal sign on his front lawn, at the end of the day, I tell you quite honestly, that's what keeps you going. That's what puts the wind in your sails. I look forward to the rest of the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Next. Next, representing the Progressive Conservative Party, Fred Gilbert.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everyone. I, too, during my past 13 years, have had a chance to visit this community a number of times. Certainly, as president of Lakehead University, we had direct involvement as we were looking at the generating station and looking at ways to see if that couldn't be converted and sustained. I do have a speech, so I'm going to follow it. Northwestern Ontario is a long way away from recovering from the forestry economic crisis that affected all of the North. 60 mills were closed and 10,000 jobs lost. Instead of revitalizing the forest industry, the tenure process created by the Liberals has impacted communities like Atikokan, Dubreuilville, and Hudson because their mills receive no wood allocations. The mining industry has yet to take up the slack, and many families have been disrupted as the chief breadwinner has been unemployed or forced to go out of province to get a job. Others have lost their pensions, been retrained for jobs that don't exist, and thus found themselves and their families in an unsustainable situation. Add to this picture the increased tax burden and flawed Green Energy Act created by the McGuinty Liberals, and we see skyrocketing hydro bills, more expensive health care, and a cost of living that many people simply can no longer afford. We have situations where people have difficulty feeding their families and paying their energy bills. Personal borrowing has increased and savings have dwindled. It is time for change. A PC government will bring relief to home energy bills by removing the HST from hydro and home heating bills and eliminating the debt retirement charge from hydro bills. It will lower the tax burden by allowing couples to share up to $50,000 of income for tax purposes. Tax rates will be lowered by 5% on the first $75,000 of income. PC government will invest in health care and education. It will clean up the waste in government by holding politicians and civil servants more accountable and increasing transparency in how your tax dollars are spent. All agencies, bureaus, and commissions, and there are 630 of them, will be reviewed. PC government will keep our neighborhoods safe, and of particular relevance to Northerners is Changebook North. As examples, gas tax money would go to all municipalities. Currently, only 1 in 6 municipalities in the North receives money from the gas tax. Northern cities and towns will themselves decide how to grow and develop because planning rules designed for Southern Ontario have no place in the North. Local governments will be allowed to develop Crown land. The Northern Ontario Heritage Fund will be protected and focused on projects that will help create jobs. The Far North Act will be repealed. Barriers to wood supply will be removed and a new forest tenure system created that is transparent and fair. Once the industry is profitable again, a portion of stumpage fees will be directed to local communities and First Nations. The Ministry of Natural Resources will be refocused on supporting, not interfering with, Northern Ontario's traditional way of life by returning it to its core mandate of management, protection, and promotion of hunting, fishing, and trapping. 100% of license revenue will be dedicated to conservation. The Ontario Yours to Discover Act will free up public trails and access roads for outdoor activities. A PC government would be small businesses' best partner. As examples, the business tax rate will be reduced to 10%, red tape will be reduced by 30%, and there will be a greater ability to bid on government contracts. I look forward to being able to expand on these issues during the course of this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. And now from the NDP, Mary Kazoris.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to the Chamber for the opportunity to be here with you tonight. I, too, have had a lot of experience dealing directly with constituents in this community. We have a choice in this election, a choice between the tired old ideas that aren't working or change that puts you and your family first. Nowhere is that choice more glaring than right here in Atikokan. It's a choice between the Liberal neglect that has allowed the largest employer in Atikokan to be shut down, or a change that will work to bring jobs and opportunities and make life more affordable for people here. It is time to demand respect for the people of Atikokan and the rest of Northern Ontario. Respect for the North is the NDP's plan to create and protect jobs in the North and make life more affordable. It means respect for the huge contribution that the North makes to the economy of our whole province. Respect and protection for the North's resource wealth. Respect for the North's ability to make its own decisions about its own future. The NDP will make sure that respect for the North is backed up by real change, change that puts people first and their communities first. We understand that winters are much harder here, but that doesn't mean that life should be harder. Respect for the North means we'll bring immediate relief to Northerners by taking the HST off essentials like hydro and home heating. We'll roll back the HST on gasoline and protect you from gouging at the pump by capping gas prices every week. The NDP will provide dedicated funds to help northern towns repair bridges and roads and invest in infrastructure like hospitals and a strategy for schools. For too long, government policies designed in Toronto have undermined northern job development. The NDP will invest in Northern Ontario to create jobs in mining, forestry, and other sectors. We'll keep jobs in Northern Ontario by making sure that Ontario's hydro rate is competitive. The NDP will remove barriers to development so that jobs are created in the North. We will assist in the development of infrastructure such as roads, rail, and electrical transmission lines. We will provide local workers with training and education. Every Ontarian deserves access to high-quality health care, but many northern communities are facing a health care crisis. Families are desperately waiting for doctors and health care services. We'll tackle the doctor shortage. We'll forgive the student debt of up to 50 new doctors to practice in northern communities, and we'll fund 50 new family health care clinics to provide timely care when you need it. Northerners value the recreational opportunities found in our region. Our northern lakes and rivers offer some of the best fishing and boating experiences in Ontario, but the way into so many lakes and rivers has been blocked. The NDP will open the roads closed by the MNR to allow local access to these lakes and rivers. That's respect for the North, the NDP's plan for change that puts you and your family first.
Mary Kazaris, the NDP. Just before we ask the first chamber question, I should mention that Elections Ontario office in Atikokan is now open. It's located in the Voyageur Mall. They're open every day, 7 days a week. I hope I get this right, 9 to 7, Monday to Saturday, and 11 to 4 on Sunday. You should be getting a voter registration confirmation card in the mail shortly. I'm not sure when this is going to air. And if you have any questions or other issues, or if you want to vote right now, you can go down to the Elections Ontario office in the Voyageur Mall. We did something a little different. After years of running these all candidates meetings, the Chamber thought it was time for us to get first crack at the questions. So we did advise the candidates of the questions. And the first one is the Osisko Hammond Reef Gold Project is one of the most promising of a range of new mining developments in northwestern Ontario. Tell us how your party's platform will help ensure the proper development of this project and others like it. And I'll ask Fred Gilbert, the PC candidate, to start us off.
I'll be happy to respond to that. One of the most promising aspects of future economic development in northwestern Ontario is obviously the mining industry. The Osisko, the Hammond Reef is just one example. Bending Lake is another example close by. We drove down, my wife and I drove down today from Uppsala to Atikokan on the logging road. And I was told that it was open this winter for drilling, and that originally they were going to drill 23 holes there. They wound up drilling over 100 holes. That's just an indication, I think, of the potential value of mineral resources in the area. A PC government has committed to making Ontario #1 again in mining. We have slipped in recent years, and part of that is because of the red tape, the bureaucracy that is in place that prolongates the time to get a mining potential development into operation. One of the things we'll do is work with the federal government to harmonize the environmental assessment process. It's important to cut the red tape, and we will do that. We will ensure fair and strong land tenure and develop partnerships to bring about infrastructure investments. Obviously, these things are not cheap. They require roads, they require energy, and in some cases, they require rail development. We'll protect existing programs that help reduce the higher cost of energy in the north. And my sense is that while a lot of focus has been given to the Ring of Fire, it's going to be mining operations like Osisko's Hammond Reef that really will give communities such as Atikokan a bright future, and we will be supportive of that.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Mr. Morrow?
Oh, thank you. I guess 3 minutes, Mike?
Yes.
I guess I'll go back a little bit to an announcement we made here in Atikokan some time ago called AMDI, the Atikokan Mineral Development Initiative. Our government brought $1 million to bear to that initiative that helped identify more mining opportunities here directly in the Atikokan area. Specific examples, $150,000 on the Sawbill Road to help Osisko keep more of the economic benefit here in Atikokan than would otherwise have been the case. What are mining companies looking for? They're looking for certainty, and they're looking, in my mind, for three things. They're looking for energy pricing, they're looking for corporate taxation, and they're looking at infrastructure. Let me talk to you a minute about infrastructure. Since 2003, our government has spent in Ontario $62 billion on infrastructure. When we were elected in 2003, we identified infrastructure as a deficit because in the previous 8 years, quite frankly, the Conservatives had pretty much ignored it. Long before the recession started, we started investing very heavily in infrastructure, and I can tell you Osisko knows that, and Cliffs Resources from the Ring of Fire folks, they know that. Infrastructure is huge. Corporate taxation, you better believe they're paying attention to that, and the NDP want to roll that back. You don't think big business pays attention to corporate taxation levels? Ask them about that. See what they think. Energy. We announced in our platform that our programs that have been in place for quite some time have now been made permanent. They've been there for a long time. We've made them permanent. Abitibi-Bowater and Thunder Bay announced 6 months ago that our energy programs are saving them $25 to $30 million a year. How much is that going to save Osisko? How much is that going to save Cliffs? The NDP candidate in her remarks mentioned mining. You know what you should know about mining? That up until the Liberals put a release out about the Ring of Fire last week, on the NDP website for 3 years from their environment critic was posted that they would place a moratorium on development north of the 51st. Well, guess what's north of the 51st? The Ring of Fire. And within an hour of us putting out a release about that moratorium from their environment critic, who used to work for Greenpeace and has been an MPP for some time now, for the first time in 3 years, that was removed from their website. Fair is fair. We're there. We've been there. We're providing several training opportunities for people who have lost their jobs in the forest industry. The suggestion, I must say, by both of my colleagues that somehow the Liberals are responsible for the demise of the forest industry is remarkable. And I hope that there'll be a question from the floor later on that so that we have an opportunity to talk about it. Many of those people who've lost their jobs, we have provided through our second career program many training opportunities. And with respect, Fred, there are well over 100 people from Atikokan who have been working for well over a year at the Osisko site. Many of them who have received training through our programs. Part of our platform as well was to commit to the opening of 8 new mines over the next 10 years. And the reason we can make that statement is because of our infrastructure commitments, which is historical. We're not just saying it. Because of our corporate taxation commitment, which is historical. We're not just saying it. And because of our energy commitments, which are not just historical, which are historical. We're not just saying it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll repeat the question. The Osisko Hammond Reef Gold Project is one of the most promising of a range of new mining developments in northwestern Ontario. Tell us how your party's platform will help ensure the proper development of this project and others like it. Mary Kozaris from the NDP.
Thank you, Mike. Infrastructure and hydro rates play hugely into this picture. We'll keep jobs in northern Ontario and strengthen our manufacturing and resource industries by making large and mid-sized companies eligible for the existing Global Adjustment Program. And this load shifting rate currently only applies to large users and excludes sawmills and smaller mining operations, such as the Osisko project. So we plan to increase the efficiency by flattening the load and reducing the need for expensive peaking plants. We all are aware that mining is extremely energy intensive, and the policy alone would mean that the Osisko Hammond project would qualify for an industrial rate approximately 15% below the current rate. And the NDP is also extending the Northern Ontario Industrial Electricity Program past its current expiry date of March 31st of 2013.
You just said it, they're permanent.
You permit me to finish, Bill?
You're right.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
The project would also benefit from 3 proposed refundable corporate tax credits, including a credit that rewards companies for investing in plant and machinery, a credit for on-the-job training, and a credit for new hirees. And finally, the NDP would maintain the current reduced corporate tax rate for resource companies of 10%.
Thank you. The order for the next question will be Mr. Morrow, Ms. Kazoris, and then Mr. Gilbert. And the next question is, the Atikokan Generating Station is about to start a switch from coal-fired generation to biomass-fired. 2 questions. If elected, will your party see this process through? And where does the AGS fit in your party's vision for power generation in Ontario? Mr. Morrow?
Well, thank you very much. I wish I had 30 minutes on this one instead of 3. I'll remark first, Fred made a comment in his opening remarks about visiting Atikokan and Lakehead University playing a role in the Atikokan Generating Station. Of course, it was our Liberal government in 2006 that provided $4 million for the research that went into the potential for Atikokan to be converted from coal to biomass. And $2 million of that dollars went to Lakehead University, and I was very prominent in a big part of the fight to get that there. I remember coming up here, as many of you do, to the meeting in 2004, 2005. My 2 boys are with me. I brought them to that to see what it's like to be a publicly elected official when you get beat up. They were there. Uncomfortable meeting, but we won that fight. And right now, here as a Liberal government, we very clearly committed to that plant, to the biomass conversion, a $200 million construction job that's going to see an incredible economic benefit to the town of Atikokan. Our commitment to it, it's in our long-term energy plan. It's there. In 2003, all 3 political parties and all 3 political leaders very publicly committed to the closure of all coal plants in the province of Ontario. Not just Dalton McGuinty, but Ernie Eves of the PC at the time and Howard Hampton of the NDP in 2003. They all 3 said it. Far as I'm aware, there's only one that's taken a position of conversion. Not just the one in Atikokan, but the one in Thunder Bay as well. We very publicly committed to that. It's happening. There's a $200 million construction job on the table for Atikokan. I heard reference to green energy projects and the problems that they create and that they might create for people in the future. I'm not sure there's a commitment to this project. I have not heard any of the other 2 party leaders say a peep about this. I'm sure I'll hear it tonight for the first time. But clearly my commitment to that project from the get-go has been clear. I came here when it wasn't so good. And I'm here now when it is good, and I'm very proud of this particular one. This $200 million is very significant. I want to remind people that I'm not sure it's committed to by the other parties. I don't know if it is or not. I know about the 90 good jobs that are there, and I know about the tax-based commitment that it brings to this community. We won that fight, and we'll win others if we keep going forward together. Thank you.
Mary Kazoris, NDP.
We'll see the AGS switch from coal to biomass to its conclusion, and we'll also continue to support the development of alternative ways of powering the plant, such as biomass, which includes forest waste of different sorts.
Thank you. And Mr. Gilbert.
Well, it's interesting that Mr. Morrow hasn't read Changebook, and in Changebook there's a strong commitment that not only will the coal plants all be closed by 2014, which is the same timeline now that the Liberals have. I think this is the third timeline that they put in place. But we also are committed to converting those sites to cleaner, more efficient sources of energy, and that includes natural gas and biomass. So there is a commitment to the Atikokan generating station. What I find surprising is that in the case of this particular generating station, I know that RFPs have been let for the biomass, yet no contracts have been signed by the Liberal government. And it's my understanding to date there's no license to operate that plant. We will, in fact, invest in an affordable and clean energy supply mix, and the AGS will be part of that.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. For our third question, the order will be Ms. Kazaris, Mr. Gilbert, and then Mr. Morrow. And our third question from the Chamber. It's been a very lean 5 years for the forest industry, especially in Atikokan, where over 300 jobs have disappeared. What can we count on from your party in terms of the forest industry and in terms of assisting communities like Atikokan hit hard by the market downturn? Ms. Kazaris?
It's rather difficult to sit here tonight and articulate the number of forestry jobs that have been lost in the province. Ontario shed over 40,000 forestry jobs, and current wood relocation processes have caused more than 30 mills to shut down, affecting entire communities. Ontario's New Democrats will remove uncertainty in the forestry industry by taking away the government's authority to cancel wood allocation licenses and give communities more control over the allocations. We'll also open new markets for wood products and energy by investing in combined heat and steam generation, and large and mid-sized companies would be made eligible for an industrial hydro rate so that Ontario's rates are competitive with neighboring jurisdictions, making our province more attractive to companies looking to set up shop here. And through our Buy Ontario plan, we'll make it the law that Ontario's money is spent here. And it only makes sense to spend as much of that money possible here to create good jobs.
Thank you. Mr. Gilbert?
And I agree with Bill that there are a number of factors that were operative that brought about decline in the forest industry. Among those was the decline in demand for products, the global economy, and of course the rise in the Canadian dollar that made our products less competitive globally. It's interesting that the Liberal government found a way to transition the automotive sector in southern Ontario into new products and sustain the jobs in that industry and put money into research activities in a significant way, while the forest industry was allowed to decline. And not only was it allowed to decline, but it has not been revitalized in a way that is meaningful to communities like Atikokan. There is a need to create a new forest tenure system and work with industry to remove any barriers to job creation related to wood supply. And wood supply is the issue. The Liberals have said that the wood supply is in the neighborhood of 12 million cubic meters. PC say it's actually higher than that there is evidence that there's 26 million cubic meters that can be used sustainably. It's interesting that none of this, in fact, could be allocated to Sapawi Mill. What we'll do for small communities like Atikokan, as I indicated earlier, gas tax revenue will come back, which will help with infrastructure, roads, bridges, and Crown land development will be allowed, which will provide local communities with increased tax base. But the bottom line, in my mind, is that we need to find a fair more transparent way of allocating that resource, and particularly to communities that are dependent as much as this one is on the forest industry.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert.
Well, two thank yous right off the bat. One to the Chamber for drafting the question like they did, which says in there, due to market downturn. Thank you for the acknowledgement that it's not the Liberal government that created this crisis. And thank you to Fred. The first time I've heard another politician in 7 years acknowledge what really went on. And I did always have a bit more respect, I don't mind saying, for the Conservatives over the last 7 years who did not try and make political hay out of the crisis that was going on in families as a result of the downturn in the forestry crisis. Up until the election got a little closer, they very rarely did it. Some of them started to waver in Southern Ontario as the election neared, but I want to thank Fred for that acknowledgement. It was not in any way government policy that caused one single mill, and unfortunately still the NDP continue to persist with that unreasonable line of rhetoric. The system that people are criticizing in terms of wood allocation is a new system. The reason we have a new system is because people didn't like the old system, and now they're talking about a third system. Sounds like more bureaucracy to me. When I was first elected in 2003, I walked into a closed mill in Atikokan. Pro Board was closed when I got here. We hadn't been elected yet. How did we make that one happen? How did we become responsible for that? We brought $6.5 million to bear to reopen that facility. And it didn't last. Why? No market. No market. If there's somebody up here with a silver bullet that's going to show me how the Americans are going to start building houses again, so that sawmills will need to reopen, there's some still going. There are some that are surviving. But the reason they're not there, most of them, is because the demand isn't there. There are more houses for sale in the United States than there exist houses in Canada. There's no new housing market. That's where the resource used to go. Buchanan used to ship 90% of his product exported to the United States. They're not buying your product. 250 mills closed in Canada in 2 or 3 years. But the NDP primarily wants you to believe the Liberals caused this crisis. It's an amazing line of rhetoric, and it's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. Families are losing their jobs, they're losing their homes, and they want to try and convince those people that if only energy prices were 1 cent a kilowatt an hour lower, maybe they'd still have their job. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. We've brought a lot of great supports to this industry. There would be more carnage if the programs that are in place today that we brought had not been brought to bear in the province of Ontario. And I can tell you that corporate people that I've met in Quebec and in BC have told me they wish that their provinces had done as much for their forest industry as we had in Ontario. Because in fact, in Quebec and BC, more jobs were lost than they were in Ontario. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for that. And now I'm going to turn it over to you, our studio audience. Questions from the floor. Please come up. The microphone's up at the front to the right of the candidates. And take a seat if you want to get in line, if you will. And we'll know we have another questioner. Please, go ahead. Can you speak right into the microphone, please?
Of Atikokan. Are each or any of you willing to step outside the box and to lobby within your own parties to battle for the needs or the wishes of the constituents in Atikokan?
And I'll direct that to Mr. Gilbert first, please.
Yeah, I believe the primary function of an elected member of provincial parliament is in fact to represent the constituents. And that means the interests of the constituents come first. That is my job if I'm elected, it's Bill's job as the sitting member to in fact carry the interests of the constituents, whether they be in Thunder Bay, whether they be in Upsala, whether they be in Atikokan, forward, even if they do not coincide with provincial policy of the party. That is the responsibility of the local MPP, and I would do that, yes.
Mr. Morrow?
Well, thank you for the question. The first thing that you need, sorry, Mike, how much time on these?
1 to 2 minutes.
The first thing that you need is representation. The reason I mentioned that, and some of you here will remember, that I think it was about 1999, somewhere like that, when the Harris Conservatives reduced the representation in Northern Ontario from 15 seats to 11. It would have gone down to 10 if the government of Ontario, the Liberal government of Ontario, had followed the new boundaries as laid out by the federal government, but we brought in legislation at the urging of our Northern Caucus to keep it never lower than 11. So first of all, you have to have representation. To answer your question more directly, I think we've already discussed it tonight. In 2003, as I said earlier, all three parties committed to closing coal plants. I came up here to a very angry crowd at the Legion in 05. 200, well over 200 people. We all remember it well. And I told them then, just give me some time. All parties had committed to that closure, and here we are, 2011, a $200 million construction job on the table. To respond to Fred's comment, Mr. Gilbert's comment, he's right. It hasn't fully gone forward yet, but there's a negotiation still going on in terms of the price point. We shouldn't really be discussing it publicly. The Ontario Power Authority and Ontario Power Generation are negotiating the price point to supply the biomass to the plant. That's the only reason it hasn't happened yet. It will happen. I'm not going to speak to that negotiation. I mean, that's being disrespectful to the taxpayers. We need them to work it out, finalize the price. When the PPA, the power purchase agreement, is finalized, the rest of it moves forward. Very clear. It's in our long-term energy plan. The Minister of Energy has spoken very clearly, very publicly on a number of occasions to this issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
As an elected representative, really, you are the employer, we are the employees. You have to be accessible, accountable, and often stand up for decisions that may not necessarily, pardon the term, toe your own party's line. And I certainly think that was a clear example around the fiber allocation in Sipawi.
Thank you, Ms. Kazaris. I'll just give the candidates a break. I'll announce this response order beforehand, unless the questioner is directing it to a specific candidate, but you'll all get an opportunity to deal with the question. The next order will be Mr. Morrow, Ms. Kazaris, and Mr. Gilbert.
One thing I haven't heard talked about tonight is Bill 191, and I would be interested to hear from the three candidates. I'm not sure if the audience understands the potential negative impacts of Bill 191, so I'd like to hear from the candidates a little bit about their interpretation of Bill 191 and what it might mean for the North, and what each of their platforms are in terms of a response to that particular bill.
This is the Far North Act?
Yes.
Kathy? Okay. Mr. Morrow?
Well, thank you. Happy to speak to it. I've heard very publicly on a number of occasions that certainly the PCs have committed to repealing the Far North Act. I'm not sure, NDP as well?
Yes.
The NDP have both committed to repealing the Far North Act. I haven't heard any of them, quite frankly, and with respect, explain with any detail what it is that concerns them so greatly about the Far North Act. They, I think, are trying to imply that somehow this is going to limit economic development in the Far North. It won't. As I said, if you should be concerned, as I said already, if you would want to be concerned about anything, you might want to remember that up until a week ago on the website of the NDP was the fact that there would be a moratorium north of 51. That's something that's real, that would have serious consequences for economic development in the Far North. That, of course, is not what we're doing. Part of Bill 191, and I toured with this legislation 2 years ago, is something that's called the land use planning process. We've been working very closely with First Nations over the course of 2 years and more. And I can tell you, as far back as 2 years ago, at least 8 First Nation communities were very interested and already actively engaged in the LUP process. I say to people, how's it been working for you so far? How's the economic development in the Far North been going so far? This process has been in place for a while. I don't pretend that it's perfect what legislation is, but the land use planning process is key to this, and it's already begun. And there are First Nations communities very actively involved that want to see it move forward. You don't hear them talking about it in the newspapers. Politics is a wonderful game, but they're there, and they're engaged, and they're working on it.
Thank you. Ms. Cazares?
Politics would be a much more wonderful game if it really involved all Northerners. And the reason why we would repeal the Far North Act is to really work more closely with the First Nations and also industry and environmentalists to draft a new act that would really support the future of Northern Ontario.
Thank you. And Mr. Gilbert.
You need to read Bill 191 carefully. Within it are a lot of restrictions in terms of what can be done on the land base. Yes, there's a planning process that's underway, but ultimately 50% of that land base will be prevented from development activities. It will not have mining activity, it will not have forestry activity. It may not even have recreational activity because there are certain other acts that take precedence, in fact, even over Bill 191. What it will do eventually is lock up 50% of that land area of the north of the province. Chambers of Commerce have said that it's a bad act. First Nations, including Grand Chief Stan Beardy, have said that it's a bad act. The PCs of Ontario have also said it's a bad act and will repeal it.
Thank you. Order on the next question will be Ms. Cazares, Mr. Gilbert, and then Mr. Morrow. And next questioner, please.
Hi. This question is for all three candidates. More than 235,000 people with disabilities in Ontario live in poverty, and 40% of us are not working. Many cannot afford the basic necessities of life, such as housing, transportation, or even adequate and nutritious food. Getting help finding a job is confusing and often impossible. And those who rely on disability income assistance typically live on about $1,000 per month. What would you do to help me and many others in my situation to break free of poverty?
Thank you, Mr. Bain. And
Thank you. Thank you very much for your question. It really helps to ground us in what I think we're all here to do, and that is to make life more affordable for everybody. I think first and foremost, many of us have had the opportunity to participate in the Social Services Review Commission. I think that's going to be an incredible starting point to look, in fact, at what individuals in this province are receiving in terms of Ontario Disability Support Program, and to work really carefully with groups with respect to some of the things we find right now that people are being declined, which includes the special food allowance and also transportation. So I think we have to look at that framework and legislation and continue to work with community partners to improve and increase the number of job opportunities and placements. I think that our program or tax credit that we're going to offer to create new jobs and to encourage employers to train all individuals, make this a very inclusive process.
Thank you.
This is an important question, and it's one that I was surprised to find is so relevant to so many people. knocking on doors, I run into people who are part of the disability and support program and the flaws in that program. I've been told directly that it doesn't make any sense for me to work because what I earn, in effect, is taken away from the allotment that I receive. I might as well stay on welfare as try and get myself a job and transition into society. A PC government will allow those people who are working part-time to keep more of their benefits and thus ease their transition from welfare to a job. The system will be streamlined. There are so many things that I've heard at the door. Currently, there are more than 800 different rules, and many of these are contradictory. Let me just give you one example, and this is not meant to be funny. There is a woman in eastern Thunder Bay, the east side of Thunder Bay, whose husband has had a back injury and is in fact on morphine on a continuous basis to ease the pain. And she says that she does not receive a certain benefit. And there's a whole host of requirements that you sort of check off that you get some funding for. And one of these is the impact on sex life. The person who has a shoulder industry gets some compensation for that. Her husband, who in effect is bedridden and she has to care for, does not receive any support for that at all. I think this is just an example of the contradictions that are in there, the unfairness that is in there, and I think that has to be resolved, and a PC government will, in fact, look at that and make it a fair process.
Mr. Morrow?
Thank you for the question. I guess I have to start by saying that when first elected in 2003, I came in on the heels of a Conservative government, and with respect to Fred, their record on issues related to those living with some significant challenges was not a good one. And I'll leave it at that for now. We can talk about it more if needed. We believe that the best way to help people living in poverty is to get them a job. I think most people agree with that. And our record here in Ontario as we came through the greatest recession and the Great Depression is quite good. Most of our jobs, in fact, more of the jobs that we lost are now back. About 115% of the jobs lost are now back, and 94 or 95% of those are full-time jobs. We've raised the Ontario assistance rates 7 times. We brought in an Ontario child benefit that is raising a lot of people out of poverty. Ontario is the only subnational or national jurisdiction in North America that has seen child poverty rates go down during the recession over the course of the last 2 years. We've raised minimum wage 7 times, I think. When we came in, it was in $6.50 or $6.75, I forget the total. We're now at $10.25. We have tried very hard to do what we can. When you govern, there's only so much resource, and the demands far exceed that resource. But we believe absolutely that what we've brought to bear on this particular file compares very favorably with the NDP when they were in government, and certainly with the PCs when they were. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gilbert, you'll be up first on the next one, and then Mr. Morrow, and then Ms. Kazaris. Questioner?
As you are all aware, Ontario, our beautiful province of Ontario, is $250 billion in debt. And the deficit projected for this year is going to be $14 billion. Now, my question to the three of you are, how are we going to bring the deficit and the debt down in your term, next term, in the next 4 years?
Thank you. Mr. Gilbert?
Great question. I was going to answer that one in my summary. We are about $240 billion in debt at the moment. Our deficit as a province is greater than the deficit in all the other provinces combined. We have, without taking immediate action, the potential of a structural deficit, which means that we will not be able to pay it off without drastic action. There is a need to reduce spending. There is a critical need to reduce spending. At the same time that there's a need to provide people with more spending power. So while this may seem contradictory, a PC government will in fact do both. A lot of it will come from cleaning up the excess in government, the unnecessary expenditures that are taking place now. We have had a lot of examples of those in the e-health scandal, as an example, $1 billion boondoggle. We have the Green Energy Act, which subsidizes in an unsustainable way the production of solar and wind power. We have examples of bloated expense accounts that all need to be brought under control. We will make government more transparent. We will, in fact, put contracts over $10,000 online so that taxpayers, in fact, can see what they're getting for their money. We have to get away from the pattern of taxation and spending that we've seen for the last 8 years. Now, the debt didn't just materialize out of thin air. It's a result of excessive spending by this government. And to try and meet that expense, they have raised our taxes. But at the same time, that hasn't allowed us to balance the budget. So I think some action is definitely necessary here, but it's going to involve some very careful analysis of where money is being misspent in government and bringing that expenditures under control.
Samara?
Well, thank you. I'll begin by saying that to answer the first part of your question directly, that the timelines for getting back into a balanced budget position for a Liberal government or a PC government are exactly the same. As I understand it, what Mr. Hudak has announced mirrors exactly what it is we've said in 2016 or 2017, I forget the year, but our timelines are exactly the same. In terms of the total debt, I explain it this way, and it's a great question, and it's a very serious question. But I explain it to you this way. People, it's easy to criticize us for what's occurred. It's the low-hanging fruit, but I explain it this way. We have right now probably in Ottawa as our Prime Minister, quite possibly the most right-wing Prime Minister that Canada has ever had in its history, who is very ideologically opposed to tax increases, deficits, and debt. And yet if you compare their deficit and debt numbers nationally to the deficit and debt numbers of Ontario, you find out very clearly and very closely that they almost mirror each other in terms of the percentage of GDP that Ontario represents in the country. So what happened? Well, we went through this thing called the greatest recession since the Great Depression. We made a decision on how we would address it. And quite frankly, the federal government under Stephen Harper, a conservative prime minister, made the very, very similar decisions, although I would say he was a bit dragged kicking and screaming to the party, whether it was in assistance for forestry or auto or investing in infrastructure, because they weren't there at the beginning. They're not ideologically in line with that, but the pressure came. And so I would say to you that we made decisions to invest. The unemployment rates through this recession would have been much more significant. The family dislocation would have been much more significant than it was. And we made a choice. And I think when you look and compare our ratios to other national and subnational jurisdictions around the world, you'll find out that, relatively speaking, they're in line or better than those other countries and subnational jurisdictions that went through the same recession that we did.
I wish for the purposes of this answer that we could have a lesson in Economics 101, which I think is very critically required by many householders. We too would certainly look at the pattern of spending that's occurred in the province, including the use of consultants and commissions. For example, we have hospital CEOs, probably the highest in Canada. So by reviewing things like salaries of CEOs, looking at structures such as the local health integration networks, looking at the use of particular services would be a start on reducing the or capping the deficit.
Okay, the next answer order will be Mr. Morrow, Ms. Kazoris, and then Mr. Gilbert. And have we got a questioner?
I've heard many of you speak of the allocation of wood for biofuel or for the Sapawi mill, like sort of in retrospect, whether you were going to rebuild the old sawmill industry or biofuel. I just wondered, with the additional harvesting of the forests in the north, how you would actually monitor what was going on, whether it would be sustainable or not. Would you actually be putting funding towards the M&R, or would you be privatizing the individuals who would be going out to look at what was being harvested? How would you actually fund that?
Thank you. Mr. Morrow?
Well, it's an interesting question. It's almost opposite of what earlier questions related to forestry have been about. So we're looking to see how we're going to sustainably manage our forests, I think, is what the question is, and how we would ensure that it's being done properly. Well, currently we have a system in place that is publicly funded, is not privatized, where the government ensures through its own audit process that the companies who have a forest allocation are harvesting sustainably. Under the CFSA, the Crown Forest Sustainability Act, that system has been in place for, I think, since around 1993. Companies that have wood allocations are required to have their own people do those checks for them and ensure it's done, and the government then audits those practices to ensure that forests are being managed sustainably. When we're in Southern Ontario talking about this, I'm always pleased and proud to talk about the Northern Ontario experience. You know, they like to think down there that they're the sustainable ones, that they're the green ones, but I tell people all the time that people in Northern Ontario, we get it better than they do, because we know that to a large degree the sustainability of our forests and our wildlife and our land is very directly linked to our livability, to our ability to have a good quality of life and to provide jobs for future generations. So if the question is about specifically public or private, I don't think you've ever heard a Liberal say that they would ever, for a second, consider privatizing any part of the forestry industry in that way when it came to the auditing in a sustainable way.
Continuing public funding is the only way to go.
Mayor?
There's no question that forestry should not occur if it is not being done in a sustainable way. We have a system in place, as Bill has described, that is designed to ensure that the process that's taking place out on the land base is in fact one that is sustainable. There's perhaps nothing that's more important in terms of the public arena than having that not privatized. This should not be a private function. The one difference that we do have is that we think that there is a larger sustainable fiber base out there than the Liberals do. And that is based on substantive information that indicates that we can in fact harvest 26 million cubic meters, and that we can do that in a sustainable way.
Thank you, candidates. The next order will be Ms. Kazoris, Mr. Gilbert, and then Mr. Morrow, and questioner.
Frequently cuts in government, as discussed tonight from Mr. Gilbert, mean that front-level workers will lose jobs. It's my understanding that PC candidate Mr. Hudak has announced 1,500 jobs will be cut with various ministry workers across this province who are already really trying hard to do their jobs and are stretched to the limit in what they do. I'd really like to know how the plan would work to cut government spending, and if it would actually mean government employees, low-level frontline workers who do as much as they can with what they have, or higher levels of government.
Thank you.
Thank you. Certainly, and we have talked to so many of those frontline workers, particularly those in healthcare and other public institutions that feel that they can no longer bear the workload that they already have, let alone look at those reductions. I think, as we've mentioned previously, for example, when you look at some of our healthcare, that there are some very serious salaries that are being spent in middle and high management, and certainly through the use of consultants. So absolutely, we have to maintain and retain those frontline services. There are adjustments to be made in other areas.
Mr. Gilbert?
I think that 1,500 job figure in terms of the public civil service has come from Mr. McGinty, not from Mr. Hudak. PC government has, in fact, committed to protecting frontline workers in areas like education, healthcare, public safety. It is said that most of the job that will be lost will be done through attrition rather than through firing. It has indicated very clearly that in the area of healthcare, we actually need more frontline workers, not fewer. So there is a commitment to ensure that that happens. The cuts in government will come from areas that are superfluous, that are unnecessary, in effect, to meeting the needs of Ontarians. We agree with the NDP that the LHINs are just another layer of bureaucracy that needs to be removed. The OPA was going to be a transitional body. It is now grown to almost 300 employees. It is tapping off millions of dollars that we feel could be used in different ways. There will be a 2% reduction in ministries other than health and education. The interesting thing is that although the Liberals haven't said so, they're looking at how they can reduce government as well. Part of the reduction is already underway, but there's also a commission that Donald Drummond is leading that is looking at ways of making government more efficient as well, and read into the word efficient reductions.
Well, the province of Ontario spends about $100 billion a year. And in an organization that size, I'll agree with what's been said already, there are always efficiencies to be found. It's continually evolving, and it should actually never end. And I have no problem sitting up here and saying that in an organization that size, you always need to be watching and looking at where you can save money. It's not ours, it's yours. And so we need to be cognizant of that fact. It's always interesting to hear the Conservatives talk, though I must say it doesn't matter where. Now, we're going to lower your taxes, but don't worry, we're going to take care of your services. I've heard that record before. I've seen that record when I was on municipal council, actually, in Thunder Bay, when the way that they did it was they downloaded provincial government services into your property tax base. It's in there today, right now. It's been there since 2003. We've been uploading it. Our government is taking it off of your property tax base. If you're looking for commitment to public services, I'll leave you only with two numbers: 3,000 doctors and 11,000 nurses. That's how many we've hired. I heard one of the other candidates mention in one of their remarks tonight that we're going to hire 200 more doctors. I think it was the NDP candidate. They cut medical school spaces in 1993 that led to a doctor shortage in the province of Ontario. We've hired 3,000 doctors back. 1 million more people today have access to a primary care provider than was the case when we came to government. 1 million more. And that's not a government number. That's an Ontario Medical Association number. So if you're looking for somebody who wants to put your dollar where it belongs, who recognizes that healthcare is your #1 priority, I think we've got a pretty good track record when it comes to that. Thank you.
Thank you. We're looking for another questioner. Have we got any more questions? The response order this time will be Mr. Gilbert, Ms. Kozoris, and Mr. Morrow.
Yes, this question is directed to Mr. Morrow. The HST was implemented over a year ago, and before it was implemented, the Liberals said it would create jobs. I'd like to know how many jobs were created in Atikokan as a result of this implementation.
Okay, we'll just flip the order then, and we'll let Mr. Morrow go first, and then Mr. Gilbert, and then Ms. Kozaris. Okay.
Well, I think if Cisco was here, they'd tell you that they like the HST. To try and answer you specifically and say how many jobs are created in Atikokan directly as a result of it, I can't. But what I can tell you is there's very few people that disagree with this policy. The Conservatives don't. They'll tell you they do. And in fact, I'll tell you that even on the NDP front, big union leaders like Sid Ryan from CUPE, Kenny Lowenza from the Canadian Auto Workers Union are telling Andrea Horvath, the leader of the NDP, cut out the rhetoric when it comes to the HST. Because they know that it is not the two-headed monster that some, not all, but some have tried to make it out to be. Why would Stephen Harper, a Conservative Prime Minister, pass federal legislation that allowed the province of Ontario to implement the HST?
That's right.
Yeah. Why would he do? Well, I think somebody needs to. The explanation, as I understand it, is that it's not what people think it is. When you file your income tax, and I hope you have, you'll find that the other half of this equation is a series of permanent tax cuts and a series of permanent tax reductions that we've brought into bear to balance off the HST that have low-income earners farther ahead than they were before, middle-income earners about the same, and higher income. Well, that's the answer I'll leave you with.
This is not a debate. This is not a debate. Please let the candidates speak. Yeah, next is Mr. Gilbert.
One can ask the question, how many jobs has it created in the province of Ontario? And the answer is probably going to be pretty close to the number of jobs that it's created in Atikokan. Enough said.
And Ms. Kozaris.
I'll leave you with some food for thought as well. I've been very, very curious in talking to small business owners to see how they've benefited, and I have yet to find a single small business owner who has said that they've been able to benefit from input tax credits.
Thank you. And next questioner.
I'd like to go back to the hydro bills. This is a community of a majority, I would say, of seniors who live on fixed incomes that are not very high. I have a problem with the HST. I'd like to see it come off. But what I would like to know is how each one of your parties will have the service charge, the delivery charge. To me, it's like going into a store and buying a couch. And the store manager says, okay, that couch will charge you $200. But now I have to deliver it. It'll be $600 for delivery. And anybody that goes back and looks at their hydro bills will tell you, lots of times your delivery charge is 2 or 3 times higher than your actual hydro price. I want to know how you're going to straighten up the mess that we've got with the hydro tax bills.
Oh, thank you. And we'll go with Mr. Gilbert, Ms. Kozaris, and then Mr. Morrow. Mr. Gilbert?
There's no question that hydro bills are, with many people, the #1 issue that they bring forward. I've asked the question myself, what's the transmission cost on there? Well, that's really the infrastructure maintenance cost. In other words, the power lines that you see, the transformers, the lines that bring the power into your house, that's all part of that sort of supply cost that we're all paying. There is a need to upgrade the transmission capabilities, particularly in northwestern Ontario. So that probably is not an area that will be addressed, I think, by any government. But what will be addressed by a PC government is a reduction in the HST that you pay on your hydro bills. And that's in addition to the 10% rebate that the Liberals are currently providing. That will stay in place with a PC government. The reason that it will only be the provincial portion of the HST that will be eliminated is because if you took the federal portion off, you would have to pay a penalty back to the federal government. That is the agreement that the province entered into when it went into the harmonized sales tax. We will also eliminate the debt retirement charge from the hydro bills, so that you take a look at the 10% that you're receiving now as a rebate and the other two reductions. That will give you approximately 20% off the hydro cost. That is important. That is something I think that will help families, but it doesn't really directly answer your question related to the transmission costs.
Ms. Gazaris?
I don't have a clear answer for that, but I do have a question that is posed very often to me, and that is how much longer we're going to be paying for the retirement salaries of several CEOs who have left the Hydro Authority.
And Mr. Morrow?
Sorry, you're done?
I'm done.
Well, I have an answer for that. First of all, we have brought in retroactive to January 1st of this year on your hydro bill a 10% reduction off the bottom line, off the total price of the bill. When people talk about the debt retirement charge, it was the Conservative government in 1999 that brought the debt retirement charge in and put it on your hydro bill. And in the years that they were in government, while the debt retirement charge was on your bill, intended to reduce the debt, the hydro debt, the total debt actually went up. It didn't go down. So they brought it in, now they're going to tell you they're going to take it off. When it comes to transmission, when the Conservatives were still in power in the province of Ontario, they were trying to privatize Hydro One. Those very lines, those very transmission lines that we're talking about that deliver the power to your home, they wanted to privatize it. What do you think that would have done to your prices and to the efficiency of the service that you received here in Northern Ontario? The transmission, the debt retirement charge, the cost of the power, it's all the cost. We all have to pay for it one way or another. You can choose to pay for it through your hydro bills, or you can choose to pay for it through your taxes. When the Conservatives were in power, they took the easy way out. They capped your price on your bill so you didn't see the true cost of the power, and they transferred it to your taxes. And when the NDP were in power, in 5 years, energy costs went up by 40%. Fred, I have to disagree with respect. Upgrades have occurred. Part of what has fueled the cost of the increasing costs in hydro bills has been the fact that we've increased, or rather rebuilt or renewed, 5,500 kilometers of transmission line in the province of Ontario. We've done that. That's where your cost is going. That's where your money's going.
The next order will be Ms. Gazaris and Mr. Morrow and
I guess my question is, first of all, we all know we have a disaster waiting for us just around the corner here at Steep Rock Lake. We're also led to believe it's $100 million to repair. We're also led to believe in 15 years some of our recreational land is going to be underwater and not swimming water, I guarantee you. I sit on an advisory committee that's set up by the MNR, And our report is just about done. I guess where my question is once that report is turned in, do we wait another 25 years before we get an answer? To all three governments, because this has been going on for 30 years, so all of you have had a chance at it.
Thank you, Mr. Duhamel. And Ms. Kozores, please.
I'm afraid I'll defer from answering that. Sir? I'm going to defer from answering that question, as I really don't have the knowledge of the consultation process.
Okay. Mr. Morrow?
Okay, well, thank you. Jerry, I will start by saying that, you know, everything you said is accurate, but I will say as well that it was our government who started the process, not sure how long ago, a couple of years perhaps now, where we came forward in a very public way. There were public meetings here in Atikokan, and we said we've got a pending problem there, and we need to do something about it. We identified that problem and began taking the initial steps to rehabilitate that site because, yeah, you're right, there's some very, very serious issues associated with it, and it's been there for a very long time. This isn't about poking any criticisms at anybody. We started the process, though, and we started that process before either of the mining companies had expressed an interest in that site. There's been some interest expressed by Bending Lake and Osisko, and they both came after we started that process. It's very serious. I've received some calls about the fact that I'd love to see this process expedited, happen faster. Well, I hope this isn't one of the things that some other of the parties refer to as environmental red tape, because as it's been explained to me, what's contained in that site is very, very serious. And if that particular facility should ever overflow its banks, that water gets into your river systems, those river systems cross international borders, we've got a very serious issue on our hands. So we've taken steps, we're getting there. In terms of a timeline, I don't pretend for a moment to be able to tell you how long this will take, only that we've started it, and there's a potential there for some very serious issues that would affect people for years and years to come. We need to get this right.
It's my understanding that a couple of the suggestions that came forward from the mining industry would in fact have been helpful from an environmental perspective. It would have neutralized some of the contaminants in there. It also would have sealed some of the potential products that are on the base of the old mine site. It's unfortunate that one of those potential solutions didn't move forward. It's also my understanding that that site has the potential to generate power. I need to know more about the details related to that, but there are some uses that can be made that would probably reduce the likelihood of overflowing from the site. I do know that it has been investigated for a number of years by scientists from Lakehead University, and they did concur that some of the solutions from Osisko and from Bending Lake would have been helpful rather than harmful. And it's unfortunate that they were not, in fact, approved.
Thank you, Dennis. And we got another question.
Following on that question, we have a bunch of poison in the water that's waiting for us. It's been sitting there for 30 years and developing. And we have a new series of mines that are looking to develop. And my question to you is, what is your party going to do to ensure that our children and our grandchildren aren't sitting here in a room saying, how come we didn't learn from the first time? What environmental safeguards are you going to put in place to make sure that Osisko, which is giving us jobs now, is not going to be poisoning us in the future? Thanks.
We'll go with Mr. Morrow, then Mr. Gilbert, and then Ms. Kozores.
Thank you very much for the question. Again, coming back to a question that implies that you want more government intervention. For a lack of a better word, you want some red tape. You want controls in place. It's always a bit of a difficult balance, isn't it, for government? Some refer to this as bureaucracy and slowing down economic progress. Others refer to it as good environmental stewardship. You have to find the balance. I believe, and I'm not completely sure on this point, that the Mining Act has been changed. I think we did it very early on in our mandate, but again, I'm not 100% sure, whereby mining companies are now required to put in place significant, easily followed and very detailed rehabilitation plans for a site when they are opening a new mine, and that the money needs to be in place to ensure that that work can be carried out. I mean, I think all governments have been negligent on this file for decades. We have abandoned mine sites all over this province and all over this country that are a horrible legacy for our kids and our future and do pose serious environmental threats, and we need to take action on them. And so I support the intention of your question.
Mr. Gilbert?
We have an environmental review process that's designed to determine what the potential impacts are of any development. As I said earlier, there's an intention to harmonize the requirements of the federal review process and the Ontario review process. But those activities are in fact designed to ensure that when the mining activity goes forward, that you do not have a problem such as the type that has occurred in the past. And Bill is right, there is rehabilitation requirements that are built in there as well that ensure that any of the things that have been allowed initially to occur do not, in fact, over time, break through barriers or cause other problems. I think that the protection that's in place now is substantive, it's better than it's ever been, and it's necessary. So I don't view this as a problem going forward.
I certainly know that this question has been posed to the federal member who I currently work for, and I would have to absolutely concur with Mr. Morrow and Dr. Gilbert that this is an area that you do really want to tread very, very carefully.
This question is for Mr. Morrow. The Spowie Mill, you are trying to sell it, and how come that you haven't got wood rights to go with it? How come it's not got that wood rights to sell the mill, to go with the mill? The ones that permanently had. Why didn't you hang on to them when you had them?
We'll go with Mr. Morrow and then Ms. Kozoris. And
well, thank you. First of all, it was stated earlier that we closed the mill. We didn't close the mill. The mill's been closed for, I think, 3 years. And I think we've talked a lot about what's occurred relative to the forest industry that has led to those closures. When the wood allocation that was attached to AFP was removed, I can tell you that I was very angry about it and worked very closely with your mayor to see what it was that we could do to try and get that wood back. But I think it's important for people to remember that mill, when it was operating with an allocation of about 650,000 cubic meters per year. The Crown allocation was 130,000 only of that amount. There's nobody out there that's going to buy that mill with 130,000 from the Crown. That was the allocation. The rest of the allocation came back to the mill through business-to-business relationships that the Buchanan ownership at the time had been able to forge with other owners. When I was first contacted about the situation that somebody had made an offer on the mill, I immediately called the owner. Or not the owner, I apologize, the person who had expressed an interest, and I had a long chat with him. And I made sure he knew up front that the most he'd have from the Crown, give or take, was 130. That was the historical part. And I said, are you doing anything to go out there and get the rest on the B2B basis that the mill historically had? So I'm not sure how truly aggressive they went after that. I don't know if it was for real or not. It's important to say as well, you know, there's a mill in Thunder Bay that's going through the same process right now, Great West Timber. And I will say also on the forest allocation process that's been criticized. The system that we're under now is a new system. We've heard already others say that they want to create a third system. But we didn't just create it because we wanted to. We created it because municipal associations, because mayors, because individual people, because communities didn't like the old system. And we brought in a new system, and now they don't like the new system, and apparently we're going to go to a third system. I'd also remind you finally as well that that same forest tenure process led to a wood allocation arriving for Atikokan Renewable Fuels. And that company has already very publicly announced, I think it was here when we talked about it, that as they move forward, there will be 100 jobs associated with that particular operation. So important for you to know that we tried very hard. I'm not sure if that operation would have gone forward with that one potential buyer. I don't know how serious he was.
In trying to address your question, I would hope that we would have looked more carefully at the allocations that were held by Abby Bow in our region, both by Abby Bow and by Buchanan, to have come up with a solution, given that there was a plausible plan in place for a new purchaser of that mill.
It's interesting that Bill has brought out sort of the historical allocation. I thought that the new wood allocation process was supposed to take into account a number of factors, including the importance of the industry to the local community. And perhaps consideration could have been given to, in fact, a larger wood allocation to the Sapawi mill than was there previously. In terms of arrangements with other companies, Abitibi-Bowater now has most of the wood rights in this area. And if an agreement could be reached with Abitibi-Bowater to, in effect, give some of their allocation to this mill, a potential buyer might be able to go forward. But there is a limitation, and this is part of the red tape that we're talking about. And that limitation is that under government regulations, Abitibi-Bowater can only enter into an agreement with whoever the new owner might be of that mill for 1 year at a time. And any new owner is going to require capital to move forward. And no lending organization is going to make the money available on the basis of a 1 year agreement.
And we got another question from the audience. And I'll last call for a question from the audience. I'll ask the candidates to make their closing statements. Last call. I think they're questioned out. So our closing order will be Mary Kozoris for the NDP, then Fred Gilbert for the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario, and Bill Morrow for the Liberals. I want to thank you for your participation in the candidates meeting this evening. We hope to rebroadcast this show at least 2 more times. From what I understand, we are live to the community tonight, and it'll run a couple of more times before the election. And with that, I'll call on Mary Kozoris.
I always believe that concluding remarks should be very brief. The choices in this campaign are very clear. We can look at the mismanagement of the issues that affect Atikokanites and residents of northwestern Ontario that matter the most here, and they can only offer the same tired ideas. New Democrats will stand up for working families. As your MPP, I will make sure that I am accessible, available, and absolutely exhibit the respect for the North. With your support, I will deliver the change we need here in northwestern Ontario.
I put my name forward as a candidate because I felt there was, in fact, a need, as Mary has indicated, for a strong northern voice. Not just a strong northern voice, but a recognition that policies for the North should originate in the North. That we shouldn't take Southern Ontario policies and apply them to the North, or have Southern Ontario interests dictate what occurs in the north. We have substantive issues here in that hardworking families need relief. We have issues where there are not enough jobs to meet the needs of young people. Whether it be this community, or whether it be Thunder Bay, or whether it be any other community in Northern Ontario, we have an exodus of our young, bright minds going elsewhere to seek jobs. We have a situation where communities need help and greater independence. And a PC government will, in fact, meet those needs. I've sat here tonight and listened to rhetoric about the old days, you know, when the Conservatives were in power last time, they did this. Well, we're not talking about 10 years ago. We're talking about now. We're talking about an incumbent government that has taxed you beyond your means, that has spent beyond its means, and we need to bring that under control. A PC government at this point in time will meet those requirements and will do it in a fair, transparent, open way.
Well, let me close by again thanking Mike, the Chamber, and Shaw for being here tonight, but especially all of you in the audience. This is a wonderful turnout, and I've enjoyed my time here tonight. I also want to offer my thanks and congratulations to both Fred and Mary. It's not easy work, and when you put your name forward for this kind of a job, I think that immediately you have earned some respect from me, and I congratulate you both on putting your names forward. You know, 8 years goes by very quickly, but it's interesting how some things never change. You know, we hear the criticism of Southern Ontario making decisions for the North, and, you know, I could talk to you for quite a while on that singular point. Suffice to say, I 100% disagree with that. I think that Northern Ontario issues under our government have quite possibly never had a higher profile and received the attention that they have over the course of the last 8 years. Nevertheless, it seems like every candidate that puts their name forward, whether it was 25 years ago or probably 25 years from now, will likely be saying the same thing. I don't agree. I don't agree. And I think that there's lots of examples that we can bring to bear to show that. I brought you some of them tonight, and I believe over the course of the next 3 weeks of this campaign, I'll have the opportunity to bring you more. You know, young people today in Thunder Bay have more of an opportunity today than they did before we came to bear as government in the province of Ontario. The knowledge-based economy in Thunder Bay is growing right now for the first time in Thunder Bay in a very significant way. I could give you examples of that if time permitted. But there are good things going on. And to talk about people's past records is not rhetoric. It's not rhetoric for me to remind you that a PC government in 2003 or 1999 considered privatizing your hydro system. That's more than rhetoric. That was a serious policy consideration that they entertained. And I think it's absolutely fair for me to bring that forward and suggest to you that it's possible that should they have the privilege of being the next government in the province of Ontario, they would consider that again. I don't know that they would, but that's not rhetoric. That's policy differences. We need to compare and we need to contrast. Thank you very much for your time. I enjoyed being here, and thank you once again, Mike, and to Shaw. Thank you all very much.
And on behalf of the Atikokan Chamber of Commerce, again, thank you for your participation. I thank Shaw Cable for its support and involvement in presenting this evening. And tip of the hat as well to Cottage Bistro for a little bit of behind-the-scenes glasses support. Thank you very much. Don't forget voting day is October 7th.
6th.
6th, October 6th. You wait to the 7th, you've blown it. Thanks, Fred.
can go to.